Hi guys, it's Joe Tommaso from the 15 Minutes With podcast. Our show is geared toward helping to keep not only teens but people in general out of our jails and prisons. Our show is unique in the fact that we use real inmates throughout the country and they explain not only about the cases that cause their incarceration, but why it's so important for people to stay out of prison and remain free. Speaking of free, have you heard about the newest and best way to put your podcast out there for the world to hear? Let me tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to produce and distribute your ideas, your podcast, and the best part, it's free. There's even a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so people can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other listening platforms. You can even make money from your podcast, and there are no minimal amount of listeners required. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and get started. Hi, and welcome to the 15 Minutes with True Crime podcast. My name is Joe Tommaso, and I'd like to thank you all for listening to this edition. Usually this show deals with individuals who have been found guilty of a crime and are serving their sentences. The hope is that their stories might share a true insight to life in prison and not some sanitized version like people see on shows like Lock Up and 60 Minutes In. The main purpose of our show is to let people see what jail and prison is really all about and hopefully turn someone's life around who may be heading in that direction. This edition of the show is a bit different, however. A listener reached out to us about Marcus Smith, who is incarcerated in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. Marcus and our viewer claim he is wrongly imprisoned and that, in fact, another individual turned themselves in not once but 3 times for the crime of murder, the second time bringing the murder weapon with him. Now, we can't say whether Marcus Smith is indeed innocent or not because we weren't there. However, we can and did verify that an individual other than Smith did in fact turn himself into police. We can also state that the detective assigned to the case, Margaret Peg Sherwood, was in fact charged with a 9-count criminal complaint and that the complaint had to do with not only hindering apprehension, but lying and falsifying reports while she was a homicide detective. She was found guilty of several of the charges in a plea bargain. Smith claims the same thing happened in his case. At the time of her admitting guilt, the prosecution stated that her involvement in her cases could in fact taint other cases she worked on. If you like this show and would like to see it continue and get better, please donate to paypal.me/Joe Tommaso. That's paypal.me/JoeTomaso. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, or if there's someone you want me to try and interview, please email me at insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. Again, that's insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. Or you can snail mail me at P.O. Box 162, West Haven, Connecticut 06516. And now, without further ado, here's Marcus's story.
An inmate at SCI Green. This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution. Green. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, press 2. If you thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Hey, good afternoon. Who am I speaking to?
Hello.
Hey, who am I speaking to?
This is Marcus.
Marcus, can you give me your full name and where you're calling from?
Marcus Smith. Marcus Eugene Smith.
Okay. And you're calling me from?
SCI Green.
Okay, now, I'm talking to you today because you are housed at SCI Green, and you've been there for how long now?
Well, I've been incarcerated altogether 9.5 years, but I've been at SCI Green for 2.
Okay, so you've been at SCI Green for 2. You've been incarcerated in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections for 9.5 years, you said?
Yes.
Okay, and you're proclaiming innocence in your case. As a matter of fact, you told me you have someone that actually came to the police and told the police that they actually committed your crime, correct?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
So, February 12, 2011, my best friend was killed. My best friend Dane Smith was killed. That night, somebody went and turned herself in. Detective Sherwood, she was the primary cop him in case she let him go. She said she didn't believe him, let him go.
Now, what department was that?
This is Pittsburgh homicide.
Okay.
So she let him go the first night. The next night, he turns himself back in with the murder weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Confesses to the crime again. She lets him go again. February 14th, they come and get me. When they come and get me, they said basically that I had committed the crime and they was charging me with it. I've been incarcerated ever since February 14th, 2011, and this guy turned himself in again on the third time to my defense team. He turned himself in. He told him how he did it, why he did it, the route he took, the escape route, the DNA from the scene matches him.
I was going to actually ask you about that too. You said there was DNA that was found at the scene that did not match you and matched him. Can you tell me what that was?
There was a hat that eyewitnesses placed on the shooter's head. And I guess on the escape route, when he was leaving from the middle of the street or wherever, there was a hat left in the woods. The hat left in the woods, they said it was mine. They initially tried to say it was mine. They tested me for it. I came back. I wasn't a contributor to the DNA mixture at all. They tested him a few months later. He came back as the major contributor in this DNA mixture of this hat eyewitnesses put on the shooter's head.
So at minimal, even if you were involved, which I'm not saying you were, it definitely shows that this other individual was there on the scene.
Yes, that was initially. Now, the things changed during trial. During trial, a lot of things changed. A lot of things about this case changed.
Okay, can you tell me some of them?
At trial, this individual that the DNA mixture came back to, he testified at my trial. Now,
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution. Green. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
now initially he said he was on the scene during trial time. He's completely off of the scene. His brother got picked up on the scene, and it was a coerced story.
Mm-hmm.
I have the paperwork to prove it was a coerced story.
Mm-hmm.
Detective Sherwood, the detective in my case, she was charged in 2018 with falsifying evidence, tampering with evidence, hindering apprehension, and a bunch of other crimes.
So you're saying that the detective was actually found guilty of tampering with evidence, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and I've been alleged from the beginning, like, all right, I was set up. I have phone records to prove where I was. I have an alibi witness to prove where I was, that I was not on this scene. I have eyewitness testimony that says that they circled this other guy's picture and said he's the one that chased the victim in this case.
Now, how did the victim in this case wind up dying?
From a gunshot wound to the head, and I guess the chest too.
Okay, and this other individual came forth not only on their own, but came forth the second time with the actual murder weapon.
Yes.
Okay, was the murder weapon produced at your trial?
Yes, it was. It was used to charge me with.
Okay, now when it was brought there, did they check that for DNA or fingerprints at all?
They checked it, but I don't. The results never came back to anybody at all.
Okay.
He walked, and I have paperwork. He walked into the Pittsburgh homicide office with this weapon on him.
Right. And you're saying that the police officer or the detective just basically turned a blind eye. Now, what are you trying to do now for your case? What are you trying to do? Are you appealing it? What's going on?
I filed a PCRA in 2016, and everything that this detective got charged with in 18, I alleged in 2016 in my first PCRA petition. My attorney
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution. Green. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
My attorney filed a no merit letter, and the judge ruled on it. Said let him withdraw. I filed another PCRA in 2018 after I found out that the Detective Sherwood was charged. I filed another one.
Mm-hmm.
My lawyer just recently, for this petition, she recently filed a no merit letter. So now I'm filing the objection to her no merit letter.
Okay. And your hopes are obviously to get out of prison, but what do you think should happen to the individual that came forward?
Now, as far as the law goes, I don't think they can actually do anything to him.
Okay.
As far as I go, of course I want to get out of jail. Of course I have the proof to back up my claims. I have the proof to back up my claims of where I was, and there was a lot of withholding evidence, and I had phone records. My phone records they didn't want to produce the phone records that I needed. I had 2 cell phones. They produced one record, but they wouldn't produce the other ones. But this Detective Sherwood, she's the one that initially put a warrant out and subpoenaed my phone records.
And your phone records showed that you were someplace else.
My phone records proved that those phones were in use at the time.
How far away from the scene were you, per your phone records? Do you know?
I'll say about a half a mile at least a half a mile.
Okay. What? Obviously, we know what you're hoping for. What would your message be to people on the outside, regarding your innocence in this case, and what would you look for? Can the public help you? This one I'm asking.
There's a lot of guys that had Detective Sherwood on their case. Stephen Zappala, the head DA, said that if any of his officers was found guilty of misconduct, he would pursue it to the fullest extent of the law. This wasn't done in Detective Sherwood's case. He let her off, and they claim that all her cases went through a thorough review and vetting process already in 2018. She was charged in 2018. They said all her cases were reviewed in 2018. She's been a cop since 1989, and with homicide since 2008. That's impossible that they went through all that. And if they did, I would have been back in court already, and I would probably be home already if they really reviewed those cases. Now,
Sherwood was charged. Do you know if Sherwood was actually found guilty at all, or
they let her in 2019 August 2nd, I believe. They let her plea out no contest, so she's still liable, but she's not criminally liable.
So basically, you can't. Well, basically, what happens is she can't be criminally charged, but she can be held civilly charged.
Right.
Have you tried anything other than what you're doing now for your case? I mean, and more than that, I mean, something like the Innocence Project or something like that. I mean, would you put a plea out to them to try to help you?
In 2013, I was sent to SCI Albion, and the Innocence Project actually reached out to me first. I never knew anything about the Innocence Project until I got to Albion, and they sent me a letter, and they sent me letters all the way up until 2018, and they was like, all right, well, the DNA already proves that this is not your DNA, so there's nothing we can do for you because they deal in DNA.
So they just basically dropped off your case.
Yes, in 2018. Now I've recently filed. I've typed up a cover letter and I've sent it to the Citizens Police Review Board and any pro bono lawyers out there and basically anybody that'll listen because I've been fighting this for going on 10 years.
That's what I'm looking for right here. I'm looking for you to basically ask, anybody to try to give you some kind of assistance.
Yeah, anybody can do it. I mean, anybody can do that. As far as authority goes now, my hope is that somebody reviews it and looks into it and contacts me because I can prove it. But I don't have no hopes that the DA's office will do it.
So now the other thing I was going to ask you too is you've had some problems with some of the lawyers in the past that have been on your case, dropping off your case as well, correct?
Yes.
You know what the reasons for that are?
They're strange to me. Now, all the reasons are strange. One of them, I have March 24th, this individual at the DNA matches, he went back to, when he met with my attorneys and he told them why and how, and this is a confession. I have the documentation to prove that this is a confession. My first lawyer told me it doesn't constitute as a confession.
Okay.
And my second lawyer, she was on the case for about a year and a half, and all of a sudden she's like, all right, well, you have no merit. But none of my prior attorneys raised any constitutional significance in my case.
So now what I'm also wondering is, by chance, do you think that your attorneys were talked out of pursuing this case?
I do. I think I think it started with my trial lawyer, because there's evidence. There was overwhelming evidence in my favor. There was overwhelming exculpatory evidence in my favor that he didn't pursue. Like this woman that pointed out this guy that confessed to it. It circled his picture and said he's the one that chased the victim. He never pursued her as a lead. He never pursued her at all, as far as a defense witness.
Do you think that the prosecution withheld evidence that could have proved your innocence?
Well, I know they did. I know they did that. They withheld a lot. And the DA in my case, ADA Shupansky, he was a part of that process. They let in so much perjured testimony that they knew was false. The physical evidence and the other evidence in my favor, the exculpatory evidence, it contradicts everything that they had that was said up on the stand.
Right now, your case is in the court system right now, correct?
Well, I'm waiting on the judge to file a 907 ruling, so yes, I would say yes.
Okay, do you know what court that is right now?
I know this is my PCRA petition, so...
Is it still state court?
Yes.
Okay, so any lawyers out there that would handle this case pro bono, or maybe the Innocence Project again, would, if you guys would be willing to help Marcus, obviously, you can contact him at FCI Green. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell them, Marcus. We're kind of short on time right now.
I know, last thing I'll say is, my case sounds weird, and I get it all the time. I've been getting help from guys that got 40 and 50 years in, and nobody has ever seen a case like this. The last thing I would say is, I can prove it. It's not just me saying it and me claiming it. I can prove it. I can prove everything that I'm saying.
So you actually have evidence, and it sounds like there's evidence there with the hat. And so, when somebody walks in there with a weapon and says, I used this to kill somebody, I would think that they would arrest that person. And I don't understand why they didn't.
Sherwood's story was, I told this individual to turn himself in for me.
You have 1 minute left.
To turn himself in for me because I wanted to see my child being born, and he did so because he was slow. Neither one of those things are true, and I can prove that also.
So, Detective Sherwood saying that you basically compelled somebody to come in there and turn themselves in, it still doesn't match the fact that there was a hat with his DNA on it. It still doesn't, that's what doesn't, make sense.
Right.
Well, I want to tell you, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to put this together and get it out there, and hopefully we can get you some help.
All right, I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
So what you guys think? I think there's some questions raised. Thanks for listening to this edition of 15 Minutes With. I hope to see you guys soon. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy.